Space Hulk 4th edition is a game that was just released, and this is a release that has made some people very happy and some other people extremely unhappy. The 3rd edition came out a couple of years ago, sold out quite quickly, I believe, and that means the players that wanted to acquire a copy had to go on the collector's market, had to purchase used copies, and they had to do that for quite a big amount of money. The prices were pretty steep. I played the game a couple of years ago, playing it on a copy that a friend of mine owns, and I enjoyed the game very much, and I toyed with the idea of purchasing my own copy, but the prices were really such that I could never bring myself to pull the trigger. So I was very happy when I saw that the 4th edition was indeed being released. And I see how people that spent a big amount of money a couple of years ago on the assumption that the game would not be released can be pretty annoyed right now. So you guys, I'm happy that now I have my own copy of Space Hulk. The edition is pretty much the same as the previous one, component-wise and rule-wise. As I understand, the only thing that changes is that there are four extra scenarios, and the rules have undergone some clarifications, but again, from what I read online, the rules haven't changed substantially. So if you own the previous version and you want this one, I don't know if you I know that you would really need it. You really would need to be a pretty serious completist to do something like this, but that's an option. Now, what if you are one of the few people that lived in a cave in the last decade or two? What if you're a feral child recently brought to civilization and trained into gaming? Maybe you haven't heard of Space Hulk. This is a sci-fi combat game in which there are two players. A player will play the role of a group of space marines entering a very dangerous area, crawling with horrendous aliens called gene stealers, and the space marine player will try to accomplish one of several missions. There are several scenarios. The objectives of the scenarios change vastly from destroying an objective to cleaning up an area, from escaping an area, from retrieving something. There are just many different things. And the two sides are very different from one another. Anyhow, again, suppose that you do not know how the game plays, or you just want to see the new edition of the game setup. I'm going to show you in my next segment of this video how the game works. I'm going to tell you about the basic concepts, and then I will share my general impressions about the game in the conclusions of this video. At the beginning of each game, you will choose a scenario from the scenario book. The scenario book has a general introduction to some of the concepts of the game, and then you have 16 scenarios. That's definitely a good number of scenarios to play. Each scenario will come with a map indicating the type of map that you need to construct to play the game, with rules about setup, possibly special rules, and victory conditions. Here I've set up scenario 9, the artifact, to show you how a game may look at the beginning of the game. Here's the map that I've set up following the instructions on the scenario book. And in this scenario, the Space Marines enter the board from here. They're trying to make it to that room where there is an artifact that they're trying to retrieve. And once they grab it, they're trying to go back to their initial area. Ugly aliens will pop up from several directions, such as here, here, there, or there, and they will try to prevent the Marines from completing their mission. At the beginning of each turn, the Space Marine player receives command points. These command points are a valuable resource. They can be used as action points, and I'll explain what action points are later, and they can be spent during the action phase of the Space Marine player. They can even be spent out of sequence during the alien phase. At the beginning of each turn, the Space Marine player will draw one of these 6 counters from a bag or an opaque container, and the number on the counter will represent the number of points that have been received. Suppose the result is 4. The Space Marine player takes the counter indicating the present amount of command points and places it face down in the 0 space of this track here. Then, as the Space Marine spends points, this marker is advanced each time that a command point is spent. It is important that the Space Marine player does not exceed the amount of points that have been allotted that turn. So at the end of the turn, the player needs to show the marker to show that the legal amount of points was not exceeded. But in this way, by keeping this marker face down, the alien player does not know how many points are still available to the Space Marine player. If you're playing the game solitaire, then you simply can draw the number, or you can even roll a die, and then you place the marker face down, and you simply move it in this direction each time that you're spending points. This display is also used to keep track of ammo for the assault cannon. Each time that you spend ammo with that cannon, you move this marker here. The cannon can be reloaded and you show that by flipping this marker, but a reloaded cannon is a very unstable weapon. It's very heated at that point. It may explode to a disastrous effect. Also, there is this area of the display which can be used as a turn track. Keeping track of the number of turns that are played is not relevant in all scenarios. It much depends on the victory conditions of the scenario. But if you do need to keep track, then you have this track here. Also, this track can be used to keep record of psychic points. This is a resource that the librarian, who is this guy here, can use. These points can be spent to use special abilities or to improve assault rolls. And again, you have a track that you can use to keep track of the expenditure of such points. After command points have been determined, the Space Marine player starts his action phase, during which he will spend action points to activate his models, and he can implement action points by spending command points, which work exactly as action points. Each model has 4 action points that can be spent, and you need to activate your models one after the other. But alas, there is a trick. The Space Marine player only has a limited amount of time to complete his action phase. There is an hourglass that will keep track of the time that the Space Marine player still has available. You turn that at the beginning of the action phase for the Space Marine player, then the Space Marine player frantically activates models, does stuff, and this is very important because when the time is over, as indicated by the hourglass, the action phase for the Space Marine player is over, even if the Space Marine player has not been able to activate all of his models. This indicates the much faster reaction time of the aliens. They move in things so fast that in comparison, the Space Marine players have a limited amount of time. They are likely to make mistakes, they feel under pressure, and this model is precisely that. Now, each model that the Space Marine player controls needs to be facing a specific side of the space in which he is at all times. It costs 1 action point to move a Space Marine forward by 1. It costs an action point to turn a Space Marine by 90 degrees. These armors that they are wearing definitely make them clunky and not very agile. It costs 2 action points to move backwards by 1 space. At least when the Space Marines are moving backwards or forwards, or when they are turning, they get a free attack with a Stormbolter or with an assault cannon. Stormbolters are the most common weapon in the game. It is this one here. The assault cannon is a bigger weapon. And, well, it's nice to get a free attack with one of those as you're moving. You can also simply spend an action point to attack with a bolter or with a cannon without moving. The flamethrower, that's a great weapon, but it costs 2 action points to launch an attack with that weapon. To attack an opponent with a weapon, you need to have a line of sight to that opponent, then you roll a number of dice that depends on the weapon that you're using, and you're trying to, well, to match or exceed certain hit numbers. A Stormbolter only rolls 2 dice, and you need to roll a 6 on one of them to hit the target. A single hit is a kill. You remove an opponent if you score a 6 on a Stormbolter. An Assault Cannon rolls 3 dice and hits on a 5 or more. But if you fired a weapon at an opponent and you missed, and you are firing it again without moving, then you get a bonus. You lower your hit number by 1. So if you attack with a Stormbolter, you miss, then you spend an action point to attack without moving, to attack the same target, then now you only need a 5 or 6 with a Stormbolter. If you attack with an Assault Cannon multiple times without moving, the same target, then your number to hit becomes 4 instead of 5. During his action phase, the Space Marine can also spend 2 action points to place a model on Overwatch. That means that that model will be able to fire during the action phase of the alien player each time that an alien model executes an action in the line of sight of the Marine who is in Overwatch. So this alien is moving, bam, he gets a shot. Moving again, bam, gets another shot at the same target. And repeated fire does qualify for the sustained attack bonus, which is really sweet. A Space Marine which is adjacent to an opponent can also choose to close attack the opponent, but to launch a close assault is usually a bad idea for a Space Marine. Still, it costs an action point if you want to do that. During close assault, each model that is participating to the fight will roll a certain amount of dice. The Gene Stealers always roll 3 dice. A regular Marine only rolls 1, so that already shows you how regular Marines are disadvantaged here. You roll the dice that your model rolls, and then you compare the single highest result. If one of the 2 sides has a highest result, which is higher than that of the opponent, the side wins and the losing side is eliminated. The model of the losing side is eliminated. If there is a tie, nothing happens. There is no consequence in the fight. Luckily enough for the Space Marines, there are circumstances that will make the situation a little less dire. For example, a Space Marine can spend 2 action points to go on watch. That means that the Marine is ready to defend in close assault. This is similar to Overwatch in that it takes effect during the action phase of the opponent. If a Space Marine which is on guard is attacked during the action phase of the Gene Stealer player, then the Space Marine gets to reroll a die in close combat, which is a little better. Also, there are weapons that some Space Marines have, which make it a little less tragic to attack. After the Space Marine player is done performing actions, the Gene Stealer player receives reinforcements, which are represented by these blips. The scenario instructions will tell you how many blips you receive. You draw, as the Gene Stealer player, these blips randomly, and there are numbers printed on the bottom side of each such counter, indicating the number of models that are represented by that blip. These are blips on the radar of the Space Marine player. These blips will enter the game from reinforcement areas, and they can be moved normally on the board as units. They each receive 6 action points, which can be used only to move and to open or close doors. A blip can never move in the line of sight of a Space Marine, but if a Space Marine gets a line of sight on a blip, then the blip is revealed and replaced with the appropriate number of models, or the Gene Stealer may choose to convert a blip into models, into the appropriate number of models during his action phase. So after this, the Gene Stealer player has received reinforcements, blips and models are moved on the board. Blips can only move or convert, as I said earlier, convert into models. Models receive 6 action points, and those can be used to move or assault. Models belonging to the Gene Stealer player are much more agile than those belonging to the Space Marine player. For example, when they move forward or backward or laterally, they receive a free 90 degree turn as part of their move. Also, yes, they can move laterally, which the Space Marines cannot do, and they can close assault enemies in their front, which is pretty much what they're trying to do. The Gene Stealers do not have range attacks, so they're simply going to try to outnumber the Space Marines, to run where the Space Marines are and to overwhelm them in close combat. You will lose a lot of Gene Stealer models, but that's not a problem for you as a Gene Stealer player, because the mother of the Gene Stealer is always pregnant. You will receive tons of reinforcements. The point is really to overwhelm the Space Marine player with numbers and with endless close assaults. It's not so much about finesse. Even though, if you so wished, you could have some finesse as the Gene Stealer player, I guess, because at least you do not have a limited amount of time. The Gene Stealer player can use as much time as he wants during his turn, again, to represent the faster moves, reaction times, reflexes of these aliens. In comparison to them, the Space Marines look like they're moving in slow motion, and to represent that, you can take your sweet time to plan your actions as the Gene Stealer player. The game is fun. The game was fun when I played it a couple of years ago, and it still is. It is a big, loud romp of stuff exploding, of gore that triumphs on the board. Not that you really see guts and stuff like that, but you can imagine how these aliens that are being blasted with all sort of big machinery. You can just imagine the horror component, the gore, the bloody component is definitely there. It's a game that is a mix of sci-fi action and horror. It's not very subtle in that you're just either moving these big, enormous Marines that look like walking tanks and pay a price for this because they're so clunky, it's so hard for them to move. And on the other side, these apparently mindless, bloodthirsty, incredibly violent aliens that have nothing else to do, no other choice but to jump on you and destroy you. This being said, there is some, I would say, finesse. This is a game that does require some practice. It's easy to play, move and fire, and get on Overwatch or guard as the Space Marine. Move, attack, maybe wait until it's the right moment to attack as the alien player. Not much else to do really. Yet it does require some adjustments, some getting used to. The timing of the actions is crucial, the sequencing of the actions is crucial, how you spend command points as the Space Marine player is really crucial. So even though the concepts are basic and the game can be taught easily, to become proficient in the game, to become proficient in playing a side well, does take some playing, some training. You need to figure out ways of sequencing things well and timing things well. The Space Marine will want to exploit the capabilities of his squad to the best by using people that specialize in certain ways, in certain areas. The Space Marine will probably want to take control of long corridors. Those are ideals because a single Marine on Overwatch can protect a corridor from a lot of enemies. It's really unlikely that a lot of enemies will manage to run through the corridor. However, something I didn't mention earlier, I believe there is a chance if you fire a lot in Overwatch that your your weapon will jam, so there's that uncertainty there. Still, the marine player, what the marine player is usually trying to do is to hold some key points to set up some defense, and then to by doing so to protect the area or areas that the other members of the team will use to complete the mission, to go where they need to go to complete the mission. And then as the game progresses, you switch this. Some people that moved forward become the defenders. The other people try to join the main group, even though the people left behind don't always make it. It's basic tactics, really, but it works well. It is engaging. It is exciting when you're seeing these elements coming together on the board. The beauty of the component adds to the spectacular, epic quality. It is a tactical game, but somehow it feels like an epic movie. The action is so over the top. The action is so intense. It's so, again, loud that you have a feel of a very intense action, even though technically it is just 10 or 10 people or so moving through a starship. The two sides play very different from one another, as I said, and that means that even if you become proficient with one of the two sides, you need to play a couple of times to become proficient with the other side. It's also great because you can play the game twice. You can play a certain scenario back to back, switching sides, and see which player does better in each role. I think it's a great advantage that the two sides do play differently. The game is also pretty solitaire friendly, especially if you identify yourself with the Space Marines and the AI. The other side that you're still maneuvering but you're trying to beat is the Gene Stealers, since they're so much more basic and straightforward to play. The only thing that you miss really is that in a two-player game, the Gene Stealer would not know how many points, command points, the Space Marine player has still available. That's a really minor loss that you get for being able to play a game by yourself when nobody's around. As a training experience, if you're learning the game, but just in general, it's pretty fun to see how the action develops if you're playing it that way. A lot of scenarios, even more than you had before, and each scenario plays so differently depending on the side that you're playing, so you can see even more replay value in that. Playing the same scenario from the point of view of the Space Marines or the aliens is a completely different experience. Great variety from scenario to scenario, a lot of interesting situations that arise. I think there's really a lot of value in this box. This is a game that you can definitely play a lot for a long time, experiment with, and then I guess that there's nothing that will prevent you from coming up with your own scenarios, but I think you can have a lot of fun with the ones that you find in this game here. Intense, over the top, brutal, violent, unforgiving, all good stuff in a game. This game has all of these things and much more. Space Hulk has been around for quite some time now, and I think there's a reason. I think there's a reason why it is, in a sense, a modern classic, even though it's so different from other modern classics like Dominion or Settlers. It's so intense and so violent. It has a special feel, a certain flavor that definitely is not for everyone. The fact that the game has been around for so long means that, however, there are people that appreciate that. I personally am one such player. I like intense action. This game has plenty of that. I am happy that I acquired the Space Hulk 4th edition. If you don't have a copy yet, if you do not own a copy yet, this could be a good chance. I don't know for how long the game is going to be around, it's going to be available, and who knows, maybe it will never be reprinted again, or maybe it will. At this point, all bets are off. Space Hulk 4th edition available now, really good game, and I'm so happy that the game is finally available.